All right. Okay. So let's get going. By the way, your color choices in your, is it an apartment or a condominium in Seattle?
It's a condominium.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, your color choices are
Um,
delightful.
they will change as the sunset starts.
Ooh. And I love the late suns. We're talking about. Let me tell everybody who I'm talking to. I'm just about to interview the composer Miguel del Águila about his 2022 Albany Records release, Miguel del Águila Orchestral Works. And this is with the Augusta Symphony Orchestra, who play the pants off this stuff, and conductor Dirk Meyer, and with violinist Guillermo Figueroa, whom I had the great pleasure of seeing in Santa Barbara a couple months ago play your violin concerto with the Santa Barbara Symphony. And we're going to be discussing this is like an amazing CD of your orchestral works, including the violin concerto, as I just mentioned. It covers a span of from roughly, I guess, about 2006 to 2020, something like that.
Yes.
And I guess as I was chatting away with Miguel a little bit earlier here, um, I want to try and see if we can talk about subtext and about trauma, and I hope everybody's starting to get interested, yeah. And we'll deal with how artists communicate their life experience. How's that? It sounds like it's the question everybody asks everybody, but we're going to go into some very interesting stuff. Okay, Miguel del Águila, three-time Grammy-nominated American composer, born in Uruguay. Uh, I'm going to do the little blurb. His music has received international appeal and presence. In fact, when I was getting ready for you today, I thought, am I really worthy of this interview? Because you've got
Oh, you're
interviews.
too kind.
You've got interviews all over the place and all over the planet. Anyway, it's fun. 56 CDs. That's token up a pretty good score there. Uh, works performed, hundreds of works. I mean, just all over the place. You graduated, you came to this country, and we'll talk about that to the U.S. from Uruguay during the bad times. And I remember the bad times, and it really is like the 70s and 80s in South America when revolutions were going on all over the place, and everybody was fleeing. I remember coming back from Seattle, where I spent 12 wonderful years, to Santa Barbara in Los Angeles, and every time I turned around, I was running into people who were fleeing from Guatemala, from Nicaragua, from Uruguay, and so on. So you came to America to get away from that nightmare of revolution and upheaval and death and violence and all the rest of it. And let's see, you graduated from San Francisco Conservatory and then went to Vienna, Universität für Musik. And I can't say the last two words, so anyway, the Music and Arts University of Vienna. I thought I could pull it off. I couldn't do it.
Und darstellende Kunst.
See?
And performing arts.
Yeah.
Uni-
Oh, I see. Okay, okay. See,
Which is a modern name. At that time, it was called Hochschule für Musik.
see, so
But
much easier.
yeah.
Really, even for me, with all those umlauts. Umlauts drive me crazy. Uh, anyway, so you left a country that was in distress, your homeland. We want to go talk about it because your whole CD, in my view, is at least touches. In other words, we can't really get away from trauma. Trauma is very, very important in each of our lives when and if and as it occurs to us, and it stays. It doesn't go away. It stays, and it influences us intellectually and emotionally and all the rest of it. That's where I want to go. I'm going to just give a quick one on Guillermo Figueroa, violinist and conductor. And as a conductor music critic, I can say conductors have a very special way of looking at things, if I may say so for
Mhm.
ourselves, because we are looking at the whole picture all the time. We're looking and hearing the individual parts and so on. And this CD is full of individual parts, and I mean at multiple sub-basement levels. It's amazing in terms of consciousness, subconsciousness, mythology, history. It's great, and we'll get there. Anyway, Guillermo Figueroa is. Remind me, please. I think he is still currently music director of Music in the Mountains Festival
He is,
in
and
Toronto.
he's also
Oh,
director of Santa Fe
Santa
Symphony.
Fe Orchestra. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Santa Fe Symphony.
Guillermo was one of the
Tell me.
founding members of Orpheus Chamber Orchestra.
Yeah.
Uh, and then he wanted to conduct, so he just left the orchestra and started conducting. But he's an amazing violinist.
And by the way, while we're on him, how did you two meet? How did that happen?
It was very interesting how we met. Um, I was in residence at Chautauqua Festival in New York, and one day I get a phone call, and they said, it's New Mexico Symphony, and they are considering you for a composer in residence. And so they called me. I was in the middle of other things. I really didn't want to take that call, but so I talked, and then I realized all of a sudden the phone call was a conference call, and there was the executive director and everything. And they said, we are considering writing an opera for Albuquerque's tricentennial in 2006. And then I was kind of shocked. It was totally unexpected. And I realized it was a conference call. There was a lot of people there. So I said, I don't write music by committee or anything. I will accept this if you let me do whatever I want, because, that's, and so I didn't expect to get anything. But then, of course, I got to do that. I got to write the opera, and it got premiere. It was a great success. But years later, Guillermo said something I didn't know. He said, we interviewed like 10 composers, and they were also eager to do just anything. And Miguel was the only one who said, if I do something, it's going to be my way or not. And he said, and I thought he was the perfect for this job. So that's how we met. And of course, we worked since then. This was 2006. Yeah. Since then, we just worked in so many things. And he commissioned the violin concerto.
With his orchestra as well, right? In the orchestra.
When he was New Mexico
When he was in New Mexico Symphony. Yeah, that went bust, as so many orchestras did in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
My conducting teacher, Lawrence Layton Smith, wrote, what was it called? Colorado Springs Symphony or something. Mm-hmm. And it went down, and then they kind of reorganized as Colorado Springs Philharmonic. But so it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just how tough the market has been. Yeah. Well, thanks for that, for giving me that connection, and then therefore, and we'll talk more about Guillermo in a minute. But how this connection with the orchestra come about? Did somebody approach you, or did you know Dirk Meyer, the conductor of the Augusta Symphony? How'd that happen, or anything?
Again, Dirk wanted to do a recording. They've done my music. He has done my music when he was conductor in Florida in an orchestra. I don't remember. Yeah. A rich city in Florida. I don't remember the name now.
That's always nice.
Yeah. So I know because they had a lot of money at that time. Okay. So he commissioned the orchestra version of Salón Buenos Aires. When he was with that other orchestra.
And you had already composed it as a sextet, right?
As a sextet, yeah.
A couple of years earlier or something, as I recall.
Yes, yeah. A few years earlier. So about 2018, he called me and says, the orchestra wants to do their first recording, and I want to include your Salón Buenos Aires. And I said, that would be great. And then I thought, why don't you do a CD just with my music, an album just with my music, since you already know Salón Buenos Aires, which is 20 minutes long, right? And that's how it started. And it should have been out in 2019, because the way we did it is, he said, we're going to do these 4 pieces in concert, which is how you record nowadays. You do it in concert, and then right after the performance, you have a patch up sort of rehearsal where you record the little accidents again and patch them up to the main recording. So they programmed it, and they programmed the first concert with half of the album. It was great. And then we were supposed to do the second concert, and the pandemic started. So that was the beginning of 2019, right? March.
Kind of. I think in my case, it was February of 2020 when everything totally shut down. So at the beginning of 2020. 2020.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
and you were mid-process in the late 2019,
Well,
if I
we
recall.
needed the second half of the album.
Yeah.
So the second half, then the pandemic came. We kept programming and postponing and programming and postponing. So it didn't happen until we just had to wait uh, a year and a half
Yeah.
to record the second half. But it happened, it's just, and I'm very glad. So, but that's how it started. It's a CD long time in the making,
Okay, and
like
let me
many
deal
things
just
during the pandemic.
and let me just go back. And there are so many stories about that event. Hello, trauma. I'm gonna get this word in here as much as possible, but that traumatic event and how it just threw the entire planet into stasis, I guess is what might be a good word for it. And again, as you and I have mentioned in the past, I personally don't think humans have yet come to grips with how thoroughly traumatized they are still from that event.
You're right.
But I want to go back just a couple minutes. We are going to get through this interview, I promise. But I want to go back just a little bit because I heard correctly, and I salute you, the idea of, especially now that I'm older, I'm there. I wish I had been there when I was in my 30s, maybe not. But the idea of this is what I want. This is how I'm going to do it. If you still want me, give me a call. Right? I'm speaking of the commissions
Yeah.
and Senate. And by the way, that also might have to do. You might do your first soliloquy about immigration now. That that attitude, which isn't hostile, it isn't being a mean guy. It's just like Claire. I'm busy, got things to do, and I don't want people telling me how to compose my music. It's perfectly correct, but very few people, as per earlier conversations, just say it.
Hmm.
Could that be part of your survival as an immigrant? Have you been toughened by the events of your having to escape Uruguay and struggle and so forth and so on?
Well, no, I think, of course, when you live through a civil war and a repressive government, and you are afraid you will disappear the next day, or in case of my family, they lost everything. Um, so they emigrated to America with nothing to start all over again. And so you kind of uh, learn to have your priorities clear because you don't have much time to waste, right? But then there were many years after that I lived without a country, really, without a passport, without until I became American citizen. But there is you have to have you to be very focused on things, or else you lose yourself somewhere in the world. And I came to America, then I went to Vienna for 10 years. So I think I always had more clear than other composers what I was willing to do and what I was not willing to do, which sometimes got me in trouble with my teachers or so, because my music was actually always the same. I, I, I thought there is something that you do in life that has to be uncompromised. And for me, it was my music. In Vienna in the 80s, you had to write Stockhausen and this kind of crazy experimental avant-garde music, and I found I had nothing to do with that, and I would never wanted to be associated with that in any. It's not a school
It's not even
that I
part of your
wanted to
DNA.
belong. Yeah,
It's not even part of your DNA.
yeah. So I never made any efforts to blend with anything or to write music in a certain way because it was fashion. I was always very aware that status quo and fashion and what's good today is not good tomorrow. Everything can shift. And if you are always trying to see what you are supposed to do today, or you end up wasting time, because that's not, in 100 years, who cares if you were according to your times, or if you did music that was in fashion that year. So I think that's kind of, it worked against me in some ways, because very often I think uh, uh, there is a difficulty in placing me as a composer. And And sometimes I think it was my choice. I write my music, and if you think it's classical music, that's good. If you think it's not, then that's your problem. It's not my problem, right? So, yeah.
You got me so in such a daydream about thus far what we know about you and your personality, but really in fact, and I was going to ask you about prejudice because you went to Vienna as an Uruguayan composing Latin music. I presume they had, went through some portfolio of something. Did you find any of that? Because I'll tell you a confession. I have had trouble with Latin music when it was actually, I guess, in the 80s and 90s, because I'm, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant or whatever you want to say, and also because my head was not open. You know what I mean? It's really about experience and so on. So I had tons of prejudices.
Well, we were taught those prejudices
Sure.
from the school, from the
Yeah.
conservatory.
So what happened in Vienna? Did you sense that you
Uh,
were being patronized a bit?
I'm very thankful that I went to Vienna. It was because it was the opposite of me. So
Ah,
I always thought I went to Vienna to learn how not to write music.
know
And
thine enemy.
how, yes, and I do very strongly believe in that. When I was a kid in Uruguay, I had very good teachers. I think my best education was in Uruguay. These were older teachers who were born in the 19th century, who knew Debussy and Saint-Saëns and all these people. So I got directly that school, which was very strict, very tough. But one of my teachers, and I always learned piano together with
I was
composition
going to
on
ask
and off.
that question. Yeah,
Yeah.
how important
So
the
I
instrument
would
was.
I would come to my lesson and while the teacher got up and went to the bathroom or something, I would play my composition that I wrote the entire night before. I was probably
Hoping
seven,
he would hear it, correct?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
all. I used
seven
to play the
years old.
clarinet just on the other side of a
Yeah.
wall where my
But
band
just
director
like a
was.
kid does something that's not allowed. So I would play all instruments, and he would come screaming, saying, "You can't write that music. That's already
Oh.
a period that doesn't exist." And
Hmm.
my composition was, he gave me some tone rows, uh, you know, 12
Snore.
tone rows. I don't know if you know some of these books like
Right.
Schoenberg and harmony, counterpoint, and I
I'm
hate
I'm an extremely,
it.
liberal person about music even, but yeah, I get a little
So,
tired of
and then
structures like that.
I went to San Francisco, and then I would go to a new music concert, and everything was just so far out. So far, a concert would be somebody with a hammer destroying a piano, while the entire audience was high on who knows what drugs were that day.
Ah, San
Uh,
Francisco.
San Francisco in the
80s, I guess.
late
90s. Oh,
70s,
late
early
70s,
80s,
even more decadent. Yeah.
early 80s. So I didn't fit there either, right? And then I thought, okay, I need to go to where all these crazy thinking things were done for the 20th century, right? And that is Central Europe. That is the Germanic countries, Germany and Austria. And so I need to go there. So I went there, and um, until I went to Vienna, my music didn't sound as Latin American, believe it or not. So, uh,
Interesting.
so I started studying. I graduated from the conservatory in San Francisco. So um, I, I continued in Vienna. And so for the first year, I remember, and my teacher liked me because I could write music very fast. And I don't know, I thought it was easy. So I wrote a lot of music. So it was good for the class. We had a class of about usually 10
Hmm.
composers or so. And so for the end of the year, I wrote a piano sonata, and first movement was great. He was so happy. Second movement, he was so happy. For the third movement, I wrote, it was instead of the usual rondo, it was a Brazilian samba. Uh, and it really sounded very samba-like. And I remember I played it. I was all proud. He looks at me and he says, "You're not serious, are you?" I said, "Yeah, this is the last movement. It's supposed to be a happy Haydn last movement. This, you can't do that. You can't do, you know." And then I've always been a very stubborn person. If you want me not to do something, you go tell me that I
That's
should
pretty
go and
obvious.
do it, and then I do the other. So he said, if you play this on your end of the year recital, I won't be your teacher next year. And
Isn't
I
it
remember
amazing
I
how
was
close-minded?
heartbroken because he was and he is a very nice person. But that's how prejudices work.
Yeah,
And
and I've already confessed mine early on in the 70s and 80s. And it's about, for example, when I was a kid, don't mean to interrupt your story, but when I was a kid, moved from Spokane, Washington to Santa Barbara, California, seventh grade, what languages should I learn? Well, surely not Mexican. You realize that you understand the derogatory. And so there I went off to French. But see what I mean? Just
yeah.
the innate prejudice that is really almost overwhelming. It takes a lot of chiseling to get rid of things, and that's what I think we're talking about. But I wanted to ask, that last movement, was it deliberate?
No, I thought, look at the traditional 18th century sonata form. The last movement is a dance, and it's a light, happy, and I continue the same tradition. In my mind, I did nothing new, only that being South American, to me, that happy final movement dance was a samba, a Brazilian samba. And well, the story ends that, of course, I played it. At the end of the year, I was, thinking, okay, I'll have to look for another teacher. And the next year, he, of course, accepted me again as a student. But they, it was a good and a bad thing being in Vienna. I was very different. So from absolutely everybody in Vienna, all my classmates, all the composers, the entire concept of contemporary music at that time was really a continuation of the second Viennese school, Alban Berg and all this, which by then had already reached it was
Exactly.
beginning to rot.
Yeah, exactly.
and and
No,
then on the other
you said that, I
side,
didn't.
yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
on the other side was what was coming from Darmstadt, you know,
Yeah, I know the region, but what was coming from Darmstadt?
Darmstadt,
Oh,
Stockhausen,
Stockholm. Oh, gotcha.
they were all there, right?
So it was all hopeless.
They called it the Darmstadt
I
Schule.
see. I didn't realize that.
So
Aha.
you were between those two,
Speaking of something
demons.
like garage
Yeah. So my
garbage
music
can lids,
yeah, my
slamming
music
in
had no
it.
place between either of those. And I very early realized that's not me. I didn't come here to um, to be influenced by any of this. So very early on, I realized I came to Vienna to give these people a salvation out of this horror, they are calling new music. And I always felt like that. I know it sounds crazy.
That's
And,
why I asked if that
when
last
you were
movement was.
20,
That's why I asked you whether that last movement was deliberate, because you do have
yeah,
a certain
yeah,
resistance about you, a
yeah.
certain. So what do you call that when you do subversive things, as in what we're going to get to on the CD? But go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always I think it's a personality disorder or so. I don't
Even as a kid,
know.
your parents would testify
Or
that you
the,
were
yes, in
obstinate.
school, I always drove my teachers crazy.
Listen, I want to kind of bring us back into focus so I don't
Yeah.
eat up the hour
But
too
let me
soon.
finish the
Oh, sure.
Vienna
Oh,
story because
sorry.
it ends
I
there.
apologize.
So after that, what I realized is also that my music had in Vienna a value of the exotic. And there is, if you're smart, you can use prejudice for your own
Aha.
advantage.
I
In
saw you raise
America,
that eyebrow.
in America, it wasn't exotic. Or in Latin America, of course, it was put down because it wasn't classical
Yeah,
the
yeah,
way it
yeah.
was supposed to. But in Vienna, it was very exotic. So that worked on my favor. And as the press criticized my music, the audience loved it, and the musicians wanted to play it. So that's where really my career started. And it was a good thing for me. It worked very well because
Wow.
the more Latin my music sounded, the more exotic it sounded for these people. And as long as they bought tickets and went to my concerts, I could care less what they thought of it, right? But it was good for me.
But let me just summarize and see if I got this great, because it's a beautiful, beautiful idea. Basically, you naively, perhaps even, I guess you deliberately wanted to see what this Vienna, these composers were about and what the training would be. So it
Yes.
wasn't naive, but it seems a little naive when you produced that last movement and were amazed that people were slapping you down for it.
Yes.
But you learned that lesson. In other words, you were actually thrown into the lion's den, so to say, got roughed up a little bit, but essentially said, no, this is me, this is what I'm going to do, and that's it. And then, marketing 101, if I'm not mistaken, you went, I'm exotic. It sells tickets.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Now I want to get to the exotic works on this CD, and what I mean, I'm going to just turn on the light a bit. I seem to be fading into darkness here. Okay, that might or might not help. Um, Help. What I meant about exotic is this music on this CD is program music for sure. Every single note
Yes.
of it. And to say nothing of the tone poem, Tensando. Uh, oh no, the real tone
Uh,
poem is the Fall of Cusco.
Fall of Cusco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me just run by the titles, which we hadn't even gotten to. The first piece, The Giant Guitar, Opus 91 from 2006. There it is, there it is. See, folks, see, folks. By the way, we'll put all this stuff up on Performing Arts Review and how to buy the CD and where to get it and all that good stuff. It's just, it's just amazing, and it's amazing on many, many levels. But what it's really amazing about is you did take away some training, all right. The orchestrations are magical and stunning, and the colors and all of that. I presume you had to have picked up some of that in Vienna. You know that some of that sort of advanced training. I don't know, but the point is, you took away more than they could take away from you. Is what I think. But what really amazes me is the colors. The orchestrations are just the way you work with instruments, especially the high percussive percussion instruments that make all that tinkling, lovely sound that, in my view, takes us immediately to magical realism. And that is you too. I have a funny feeling, just like your whole culture, because when I hear the tinkly tinklies, I think, oh, he's taking me somewhere now, and off we go on an adventure. Anyway, here are the pieces for everybody, and then maybe we'll just kind of go through them a little bit.
Sure.
First piece on the CD, The Giant Guitar, Opus 91 from 2006. And when I first saw it, I thought, The Giant Guitar, what? And I was expecting every stereotypical thing that you would gather, perhaps, or an idiot like me would, from the giant guitar. First, what is he talking about? It's got to be lots of guitar, and of course it's nothing. And as you describe in the program notes, that piece is about all of South America, the culture, the ambiance, the everything, and the whole CD is that, I think. Anyway, then as we've discussed a little bit, the Cello in Buenos Aires, Opus 102 from 2010. 3 movements, and I looked at it and I thought, okay, samba, tango to dream, and I thought tango to dream. That started me to get confused. You're good at this, and
on purpose.
and then obsessed milonga, and I thought obsessed milonga, and then I thought, well, it's going to be cute, it's going to be fun. These 3 dances. There is nothing there. I know there is, but from my absorption point of view, these pieces are about everything else but the dance form, I do believe. They are character studies of the people of these 3 countries involved. So we'll go there. The violin concerto I want to touch on. I didn't really take any notes this afternoon because I had reviewed it already, and I can touch on that, but I want to be kind of reminded of the journey by you. Tensando, Opus 126 from 2020, the most recent piece, is really interesting. And then The Fall of Cusco is like an instrumental opera in 20 minutes or something. I mean, it's 3 acts plus the end of the world or something. I mean, okay. So let me get up to my questions and see if I have anything here that we haven't already touched on. We've touched on your youth in Uruguay and being inspired, and piano study as a kid. Getting that anchor is so important. Obviously,
it is very important.
Yeah. Okay, so we did that, and how you met everybody. I think I'm just ready to plunge in. And here's how I did this. It's how I do it, and it could be all wet, but I just sit down at the keyboard, put it on, and then stream of consciousness. And then later go back and go, what that,
Mm.
I'm ready to do. But I just, the giant guitar, Opus 91 from 2006, I'm just going to read a couple of my impressions, first time, which is all I had time for, and then you will straighten me out on it. What I'm getting at is what did I, listener number 14,073, pick up image-wise, and then what is it really about? Loaded with symbolism for the composer, for symbolism for the composer. This is your memories of things. Compares all of South America to a giant guitar. So and what I got was South America, this and I think you even put this in a quote somewhere. This friendly, sentimental, nostalgic, and yet all of that is there, and yet there is concealing this tremendous grief and this powerful secret. And why don't we start there? This powerful secret. Let me touch on it, and then you clarify. The powerful secret is kind of like what? How many hundreds of years of oppression? I think I'll just stop there.
Yes. Giant guitar started John Falletta,
Oh
who
yes.
conducts Buffalo Philharmonic. She was in Long Beach for many years. That's where we met. Um, she has by now a pretty famous guitar competition because John Falletta was a guitarist, is a
Oh, I didn't
guitarist.
know that. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Huh.
And she asked me, Miguel, can you write a piece for the first concert of the competition? And I said, yes, great. I'd love to write a piece for orchestra and guitar. She says, no, the condition is that it doesn't have a guitar, but it's about the guitar. And
Clever.
it didn't make any sense to me. But then I thought, okay, why not? So, um, for Latin Americans or Spaniards, the guitar is a very special instrument. It's really, when I hear a guitar, I immediately become nostalgic of Latin America. And so the moment I started, the piece begins with open string guitar chords and tunes.
Very clever.
There is a lot of guitar in it hidden.
Yeah.
The horns are playing guitar parallel chords, things like that. But um, I usually, I'm not the boss of the pieces I write. I set out to write one thing. I think I never write a note until I have the idea of what it's going to be, the whole thing. But then as I start writing, you change course, right?
So like a novel, same thing. Like a novel,
yeah.
You plot it carefully, but it can change course on you depending on the
a,
animus of the energy going on. Okay, sorry.
Well, to me, it's like you're creating a living thing as you write, and that living thing takes more and more control of you. Tells you, I don't want to be this, I want to be that, I want to go there. The piece starts very friendly, very nice, very lots of guitar, and soon it turns very obsessive and dramatic. And that same nostalgia of the guitar that I used to start this piece started bringing also these horrible scenes from the dirty war, the military government. So by halfway into the piece, my head is just going crazy, and it shows in the music, right? And the guitar, it's very much a symbol. If you ever go to the countryside in Latin America, to any country, there is always these very friendly people, very and then you start getting to know more the town, and you realize, they are like the only survivors of a whole culture that had thousands of people in this town and the other town, and so there is like a double reality, And then
that's kind of the magical realism thing, in a way, isn't it? Isn't that kind? I mean, part of it's magical and mystical and imagery, but magical realism, as in this duality of what's real and what's not real, going on simultaneously.
Well, it's also the even colonialism. Think that what the culture that's considered typical Argentinian, typical Uruguayan, it's not really from there. It's a
Yeah,
mixed salad of
yeah,
everybody who
yeah.
came there. So it is it's really like a new experiment, social,
Hmm.
in terms of cultural, um, how you put all these together. And
The blend, do
um,
you mean? The conquistadors blending, if you will, in terms of mating and
yeah,
whatnot with the natives, and so on. Then the result over 2 or 3 generations is what you're getting at.
well, there were many more. Think
Many
of
more than, yeah,
the Spanish influence
yeah.
in Latin America goes back 500
I was
years, so
just
it's
comparing
a
that
long time.
in my mind with the North American whites, and they didn't blend very well. They just killed them all. You know what I'm saying? In other words, talk about vicious. The elimination of Native Americans. At least there was some mixing. I'm sorry. I hope I'm not in trouble yet with anybody. Go ahead. I'll keep my mouth shut now.
Yeah,
But you know,
yeah,
cruelty and cruelty. Uh,
yeah, and so there is always these two realities. Also, how you relate to Latin America, because my ancestors were Spaniards, right?
mhm.
So, but yet I'm Latin American, obviously. So you are many things, and then you relate musically to the different aspects of this culture, and so that's why, to me, when I think of a guitar, I think, of course, of this beautiful nostalgic music of your childhood, your youth. I was 20 years old when I left Uruguay. Uh, but then all the memories, the bad memories come, the repression, the crimes of the military governments and all that. So,
Boy, and you
the,
were vulnerable if this was happening when you were in your late teens and early 20s. You would have been a real, yeah. I mean, that was not a good time to be in Uruguay.
no, that was actually the worst time of the
Yeah,
repression.
yeah.
It was, yeah,
Life and death is what your immigration was, really, without exaggerating very much. Do you think, or am I exaggerating a little bit?
no, 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 we had to leave. My
Yeah.
parents um, were definitely against the government, and the militaries knew it. So they couldn't leave all of us at the same time. They didn't
Mm.
let us. So my older sister was living in the United States, and in 74, my parents and my youngest brother, who was 1 year old, said they were going to visit my sister, so they left.
Ah,
And the idea was the militaries knew they were coming back because three of us, their children, were left behind. So we were, you know,
standard
uh,
authoritarian way of treating people. Leave
yeah.
leave hostages behind in the country
So
so the others will come back. Yeah.
yeah, but once they were here, my parents had to apply for a green card. We couldn't get any kind of refugee status because the United States was on the side of the military government.
Yes.
Kissinger and Nixon, they were part of it. You know, it was the the Cold War that was fought there. So
Yeah.
we got no help from
Yeah.
anywhere. So my parents applied for a green card. In the meantime, they couldn't go back to Uruguay. So when they left, I was 15, and for 4 years we were there alone with my three younger brothers. So
Well, that
it
already
was
is traumatizing.
it was very traumatizing.
If you were
At
the
first, they
oldest
left us.
kid, you
They
know,
left us with
and
this.
mom and dad are going, good grief. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So my youngest brother was 7. The other was 8. The was um, so first they left us with this lady who was our cleaning lady, but she stayed in the house and took care of us. And soon the money ran out, so of course she left. She said, "I'm sorry, I love you to death,
Mm-hmm.
but you know," and it was tough. It was very, very tough. And it took us 4 years finally to get out of there.
Thank you for that. It's really you've helped me understand even more about traumas and how we're talking the 1970s, and it's still with you in 2006 and 2010 and so on. The
Yeah,
compositions, it's always there. That's kind of what I was getting at in the beginning. Let's move on, but I guess in some just for because This is a CD. Hello, I'm looking at folks out there. This is a CD for college and professional orchestras, but for conductors who are looking for repertoire. I mean, there are pieces on this CD that are, why am I not hearing them more? You know, and others, they're just perfect. So I hope we can get the word out more. And of course, you have already have a huge career. What am I talking about?
No, it's.
But I think I'd like to move on so that we can kind of, you know, I'm keeping a little bit of an eye on the time here. But so next on the CD, so you see the wonderful orchestral narrative in the first piece, with all kinds of imagery. The guitarra is actually a metaphor for all of South America, okay, if you will, for Latin culture and all the rest of it, for heart and soul even. So the next piece, Salon Buenos Aires, Opus 102, for a chamber orchestra. This is the chamber orchestra version. I think we discussed at some point you had originally composed this for sextet, for wind sextet. Wind or strings, I can't remember.
Flute,
So
clarinet, and strings and piano.
Oh, okay, gotcha, thanks, okay. So Salon Buenos Aires, 2010 is the orchestration, the orchestral version that is on the CD. As I mentioned, I think somewhere in our conversation, 3 dance movements, samba for Brazil. Oops, I've got to go down here, but tango to dream, representing Argentina, I guess depending on how skilled I am at pronunciation. And the last movement, Obsessed Milonga. Now you tease us a little bit with these titles, so I went in going, Obsessed Milonga, what's that? And whatnot. Then I began to realize that we're speaking about portraits of 3 countries. Is that kind of...
Yes, Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina.
Yeah, okay, got it. And now I'm just going to throw a little bit at you about my kind of thoughts as I went through this, and then you give us the corrected overview. Hang on. I've just gotten lost here. There's so usually what I do is I write these notes in not in bold, and then I go back and I pick the little goodies, the juicy bits, and highlight them. Well, this whole thing is highlighted in bold. What I'm trying to say is, I have.
It's all important. So.
It's all important. So the first piece, the samba from Brazil. I just want that representing, I should say, Brazil, in a way. It's representing the people, the attitude, the heart and soul that is Brazilian to you as an Uruguayan. Even that I find fascinating. And as always with all of these pieces, I'm just going to look at it. I just immediately fell in love with this imaginative opening. It sends us immediately into a spell. You have that trick where you just can go, okay, magic time. Here's the dust, and we go into a trance and follow you on this trip. But I think there's been some mention in the notes about the cinematic nature of your writing, and I've just told you I think your orchestration is magnificent, and cinema indeed, and that's a high compliment. And what I mean by that is the idea of so-called cinematic music to just sweep people off their feet, and you've got that magic. So right away with Brazil, maybe we better go through it each one a little bit. Let's start with Brazil. Tell me a little bit about this.
I think that the cinematic, I usually visualize music. I see a piece of music from beginning to end, all as you would see a painting. So it is very often I'm told that my music has it's like a movie, or has cinematic sort of effects, and it puts
in terms of
you
narrative
in one place, and it tells a story, and but I don't try to write a movie. It's just to me, music, art has to take you away from reality in some way. If you are in a concert hall and you are aware of where the exit sign is on and the lady 2 seats from you, then whatever you're seeing is bad.
Yeah.
Right? So if art is good, it immediately puts you in a way, which is the reason why people like art, because it's a way to avoid the reality that you are every day in and to go to another reality of your choice. How good is that, right? So, um, and I'm aware of that, and I think that's the way I've always written music, maybe for my own escape, and then it
Mm.
ends up being that way for whoever else is listening, right? So Salón, Buenos Aires, Uruguay is a very tiny country. The whole country is 3 million people, and Brazil is 42 times bigger. Think of it. And Argentina is also huge. So we are there squeezed in the middle between two cultures, really. Brazil speaks a different language. And of course, the folklore is so rich. So Uruguay is sort of a buffer zone between two big cultures. And this Salon Buenos Aires, in a way, it is that. It starts with a lot of Brazilian influence. Again, I never claim to use true folklore. To me, Brazilian is a flavor. It's not that I'm copying this time signature or this, I don't care about that. Of course, there is people who want to write books about the real samba. To me, samba is what makes me feel that I'm there in some way, right? Or um, so it starts that way also because it's very, if you see the evolution of the piece, it starts very bright, in a good mood, right? And then by the second movement, Tango to Dream, something happened.
Oh,
The
I see the
second,
big overview of the between the three dances. Thank you.
between
I
the
thought
three
maybe
pieces.
because I even saw a little bit of darkness at the very end of the first piece,
Yes,
as I do see also in
to
all three.
trigger to trigger the second movement, right? So
Oh,
it starts
perfect.
totally harmless,
Now I get it.
and it starts getting more and more intense.
Yeah.
And I think there is a point, this is no samba anymore. Something is going to happen here, right? Um, and
And
then,
I was looking at them as separate pieces. Now, thank you for that about the transition into the second dance piece, because that really makes good sense. So the tango to dream is no even accident of words.
no, no, it's a
Go.
tango that um, to fall asleep to dream to, and as it starts, it's something happened, and you are really in a dream by that tango, and it is actually it is the begin the very quiet theme. It's a lullaby if you think of it. Da, da,
You
da,
can hear it.
da, da,
Yeah.
dee. It goes nowhere. I always tell whoever is playing it, give this melody no phrasing, no expression. It just has to keep flowing flat.
Stop
And
already. I have to jump in because you have just described one of the most amazing colors, if you will, that also speaks to something that's I almost had almost like a zombie or something. There's clearly a message you want to put out about that flat, monotone, unemotional bit of,
yeah,
yeah, go. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's
yeah.
like, is that
So,
what you meant?
but
Oh,
it's something I always have to fight the performers, the chamber or
sure.
the orchestra, because I want to give expression to that tune, which is made in force,
But
da
why do you,
da da,
but why do you want
because
it to be
I
monotone?
wanted to first create these sort of lonely, quiet, almost lullaby world all alone in the night, and then it starts in the middle of it. It starts growing, and then it becomes a very passionate tango and very very intense. So I wanted to
I call it another
bring
consciousness in
your
my notes.
heartbeat to zero, if you can think of it
Yeah.
that way, and then drive you totally crazy emotionally, and which if you're a violinist, it's pretty hard. I realize uh, there is an accelerando and a
Hmm.
crescendo and a animando, and every single bar is faster and more
Hmm.
intense for many bars, like 20 bars, right? And that's the climax in the middle, and
It's
then
the
it dies.
hysteria.
Yeah, and then it dies. It reverses the same thing, so it quiets down and it ends in the mystery and the darkness again, um, which to me that was a lot of the Argentina I remember. When I was a kid, for example, I have a very different idea of, for me, tango is something totally different from most of the world. When you grew up in Uruguay or Argentina, tango is the music you listen to on the radio. It's also the music if there is a family gathering or a children's party. You see your parents dancing it and your uncle dance. So it was a family thing. And I know outside of there, people don't have that concept of tango. You would never associate tango
I
with
think of it as
your
sexy.
parents dance.
You know, as a couple dancing sexily. The samba.
Yeah, yeah. But for me, it was a family, and it was also the good times. So
as a child, yeah, the memories, those memories.
You know, Argentina used to be the fifth most the richest country in the world.
Yeah. And very Parisian. I could have sworn I heard somewhere in there something that was like a Parisian, the Paris that confirmed the imagery for the country.
To this day, Buenos Aires is a beautiful city. Yeah. But so that feel of this woman has in a way that dream of my memories of that Argentina when I was a little kid in Uruguay, right? Because they're very next to each other. It's the same culture, and then how it all collapsed in the 70s, you know, and so, and then out of that comes a third movement, the milonga. Milonga is actually a precursor of the tango, and it started in Uruguay. It's still like all dances. It's still much faster.
I recognize it, but I didn't realize that connection, that it was kind of a precursor to tango.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
It was much faster, and so the last movement ends with this obsessive rhythm that repeats on and on. And
by the way, you yourself, because I have the quote, have confessed that underneath this happiness there is tension and angst.
Yeah.
So there.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
It ends the piece in a very intense way, obsessive, rhythmically stuck.
But lush.
Yeah.
Very lush.
Yeah.
Let's see. My note here on that last one was something about. Let's see. This is the most uncomplicated of the three. In other words, you're more directly giving us a dance send-off, if you will. It's not
for uncomplicated. You mean the last movement?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was thinking it was the most straightforward, or is it the most subtextual?
I think it's the lightest.
Yes,
movement,
that's
in a way.
Essentially.
But it drives musicians crazy because of the rhythm. It is 13/16 all the time, and then they constantly change.
Why do you do that as a composer? I've always asked this question of composers. You know, why do you drive us crazy with stuff like that? Why?
In my case, I don't know. Like, a lot of my music is crazy time signature.
And it just comes out.
13/16 plus 7/16 plus 11/16, presto. I don't even know what time signature. I never know what time signature I'm writing.
So you have to kind of figure it out later, or make it make some kind of sense later, if you will.
Well, the music comes, and when you're whistling something, or when you hear it in your head, you don't know the time signature of.
Yeah, that explains it perfectly. Yeah, the
organization.
organization.
But then when
of
you
what
put
came
it
out
on
of your
paper,
head.
you realize, oh my gosh, I'm throwing again all these 13/16 plus 7/16s, or these people are going to hate me. But that's the way the rhythm comes, and
you have just absolved yourself from all responsibility for being a mean guy that writes this stuff to drive musicians crazy. So it's perfect.
Well, I don't do it on purpose. It's just, I always had a very strange sense of rhythms. Since I was a kid, I remember some composers really bored me if they were not rhythmic. Mm-hmm. To this day, some composers, I don't want to make
What's that? I was going to say.
For example, I always love Haydn because he's so rhythmic, right?
And also worldly, in my mind. He's.
But I always got so bored with Brahms because he's all 3/4 and occasionally, a hemiola here and there.
And he worries too much, and it takes him 30 years.
you're crazy, there is nothing like Brahms. But I always needed the I think rhythm to me is the engine of music. And that engine to me was always complicated. Guillermo sometimes makes this joke. He said, Miguel, you suffer from musical arrhythmia. And I know how he means it.
It's almost literally so.
But to me, it sounds so square.
By the way, every percussionist that I've ever known that's a composer writes fabulous stuff because they know exactly what you've just described. Rhythm and pulse and all of that. It's so important just to keep the blood flowing and keep audience attention and all the rest of it. And then you have the excuse that you're Latin, right?
Probably.
To a certain extent, yeah.
And I grew up hearing very rhythmic music. So.
I didn't mean to say that so offhandedly, but yes, I understand. I do want to try and keep so that some people will see more than 7 minutes. You know what I mean? Short-term memory loss. People dance around it. It's fine. It doesn't matter. But I realize we got so much more, and I just want to speak to everyone about that. This CD is jam-packed with fabulous works. I don't want to leave the violin concerto out because it's composed in 2007. We've spoken about violinist Guillermo Figueroa and these three movements. I guess let's kind of touch on it as an overview. I don't want to say too much. I've reviewed it for the Santa Barbara Symphony and so on. I love it, and I've mentioned to you this, and you've I think explained it a little bit earlier, something about how this thing, the magic. In other words, again, that first movement, it's crossing the ocean to the new world. It's very straightforward, but it's you'll forgive me, cinematic, high compliment, magic of transforming putting me right there in third class, I presume, in third class on the ocean liner crossing the sea. That the Vaughan Williams Sea Symphony, when you can grab that somehow within your imagination and music. Go. I speak too much. Three wonderful movements.
This was actually, I wrote this for Guillermo after the premiere of the opera. And I worked so hard in this opera. And I was back in California. And so then I started writing this piece. I couldn't think of a concerto just as a concerto without any story to it. So immediately when I put a violin in it as the soloist, the violinist to me became a protagonist of a story. And that's the way I saw it. And
now sometimes some other composers would say, well, that's all fine and good, and we understand this. The soloist is always the protagonist, and there's the thing between the orchestra and the soloist. And in my head, I'm going, oh, technical this, technical that. No, yours is completely different. Yours is a three-movement voyage indeed.
Tell a story.
Tell the story is what is your signature, all right.
And as I started writing that. Well, things happened. I was already in California, but my grandparents left Andalusia there from Spain, from Almeria, and about 1913, they came to Uruguay, and like most immigrants, they were very poor. They both died in Uruguay. They both dreamed of going back to Spain, but they never had enough money to go back. In those days, going from Uruguay to Spain, think of it, it was a long trip.
Brutal, I would think. Brutal. 2 weeks easy, even in 1913.
It was like 3 months or something.
Oh, really?
So, I'm sorry, 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah.
But they would always tell the stories, how it was when they left. And so it was, when I started the violin concerto, I started being in that ship, in the middle of the ocean, just with all the thoughts of these people having left everything behind, going to a country they know nothing about, and then being stuck in that country, and that's the dark second movement, right? And having the nostalgia for their country, Spain, and then in their mind, the last movement happens really in their mind. It's not real. So in their mind, going back to their little town and confronting all these and seeing all the places, but then sadly realizing that um, they cannot go back after so many years. When they go back, there is other people, other places, so you can never go back to the same place again, especially if you emigrate and you wait 30, 40 years, because time has a way of erasing everything. And then when you move back, when you go back, you are like a ghost from the past.
Yeah, and
So,
also you have been changed forever.
and you have been changed
So the
on top of,
village, you know,
yeah,
you just can't be of the village
yeah.
again, if you will.
So that's the story of the violin concerto. Is this person in my mind is sort of a mixture of both my grandparents into one person. Um, so the trip from Spain to Uruguay, then their life in Uruguay, usually, I don't know, some dark day, because the second movement is very dark.
When you say in the title of the second movement, in the purple land, I mean, talk about magical realism all over again. What is meant by in the purple land? Can you
Yeah,
describe that?
people who know where it is placed geographically, because Uruguay was called the Purple Land,
Aha.
in
Bingo.
very early travel um,
Hmm.
books about Uruguay in the 19th, 18th century, I think already. Also because there the skies, when you are far, maybe in Spokane, you've seen that the the sky has very often Uruguay is far south already,
Mm-hmm.
so a purple color, the sunsets, that
Mm-hmm.
you don't see in California, for
No,
example.
no. But further north you do, just as in
Yeah,
Seattle where you are. The
yeah,
long
I see.
the long what do you call it, dusks in the
Yeah,
summertime that go on
yeah,
till 10:30, 11, and it's still light out. Magical. But as per myself, my immigration was only back home to Santa Barbara from Seattle. But as we've talked, I've been watching Seattle. It's now been, I think, going on 50 years or something, and there's no going back because it's a completely different place.
it is, but
Yeah.
it's a different place. If
Yeah.
you accept you are going to see a different place and meet different people, then it's good to go back,
Yeah, I see. I understand.
because you don't have expectation.
Look,
The
we're. Oh, sorry. I don't mean to jump in here, but I want. Let's talk about the last two pieces just kind of briefly because they're two huge tone poems. So I just don't want to. We'll when we put the page up, this is going to make better sense, and I hope people will go there, especially conductors, because this repertoire is so rich in programmatic music in that very good sense that an audience is going to be swept away and is swept away by all of your music. I have a funny feeling, but I want to look at Tensando, Opus 126, Tempering Drums. Was written in 2020 during what, your isolation or something, and it's not a depressing piece at all. It's a spiritual piece, actually.
it is, yeah, and it's based on a ceremony before. Uruguay has a carnival like Brazil, um, which part of it is has to there are percussion ensembles with different kinds of drums, and it's African tradition too. But and then they play, and as they walk through in a procession through part of the city. But before they play at night, this happens at night, right? They warm up the drum skins on the fire. Uh, I wish symphony orchestras would do that, because the
To
percussion
tune
section
them,
would
yeah?
sound better.
To tune them,
No,
to make them tighter, or what? What
to make them tighter.
yeah,
That's what the
exactly.
fire does to the
To,
actual
to the
skins from the
skins,
drum.
yeah.
So I tried to make that, and then it's also sort of a mystical thing that happens, because people gather around the fire and try to visualize, right? The drums, and then as they warm the skins, they start improvising, and then they're joined by other people. But at first, the drums don't resonate, so they slowly start resonating. And when everybody thinks they're done, then they start walking. But there's always some kind of fear, some kind of magic to it.
It's positively
And
pagan, is what it is.
it is totally,
The fire,
absolutely,
the sparks flying up, and the
totally.
gathered
Yeah.
around, and
But
flaming the animal
as a kid,
skins and everything.
yeah, as a
And
kid, to me, that was magical. And
oh, well,
so in this
yeah,
piece,
sorry.
I try to recreate some of that with the orchestra. As the orchestra begins, there is nothing but noise, so muffled drums, really,
I
and
hear it as a
noise.
kind of beehive sort of thing. There's something kind of ominous and low, and but very busy, very something
Yeah,
is going on there
but
in that beginning. Very
the idea
evocative.
is, okay, what's happening here, right? There is no music, there is just sounds, strange sounds and rhythm, and then slowly the music starts happening, and the piece has no real uh, melodic themes. It has just rhythmic cells that happen to have some associated to some chords and melody, but it's a piece
It's
about rhythm. There is just nothing else. They
and
are all
and pure
drums.
storytelling. I'm seeing one of my notes. I can hear the tinkers. There's a section that sounds like the tinkers working the coil. I'm imagining a coil or something around the outer lining of the drum, but I hear tinkers like Wagner, if you will, on the anvils. Am I close?
Yeah,
Was there?
yeah, no,
Did
absolutely.
So it wasn't just me hallucinating. Oh, good, good,
Yeah.
good. Okay. It says these sounds are like tinkers hammering, tempering, tuning the drums. You use harp in the most amazing spiritual manner. It always evokes, the mists. It's the witches around the
Mm.
cauldrons or something, but it's just magical. Let's see. The South American rhythmic blood flow. I'm getting further into the piece on my notes. The segments are like several winks and a nod. I'm trying to remember what I was trying to say. This between. Oh, I know why. Several winks and a nod. You shoot me down here, but be, between heritage and trauma. Does that make any sense at all? Is there anything down there near the end that's because
Well,
there's
again, I mean, think of it. The story, it was a pandemic. I was writing this music. The story came from my head, from my memories of those times, right? And all that doesn't exist anymore. So there is these two realities.
what I wrote here is it's clear there's more here than meets the ear.
Mm.
The whole last section is brilliant, exciting, and terrifying at the same time. That last chord. Okay, now, happy news. We get to now reminisce about the fall of the entire Inca civilization.
Yeah,
This
this
opus
is like the top of the drama of everything.
Opus 99, composed in 2009, and just to kind of give it the overview, sonically imagine the last final days, or maybe it was in the programs of the Inca Empire, ruthlessly obliterated by Francisco Pizarro and his conquistadors in 1530. And that's the whole thing about, and back and forth we go. Immigration, isolation, being forced out of your homeland. This is the complete destruction of a civilization, the fall of Cusco. You need to take command now and tell us about this
I
piece.
I don't want people to think that my music is negative. If you listen to my music, and most people, what they say, and most performers, most musicians, that your music is so much fun to play.
Oh, really
Uh,
wonderful, and it's also
and
gorgeous, by the way.
so
It's also gorgeous.
to hear, and I think uh, sometimes because of all these extra musical um, components in it, you may think that either if you don't think of it this way, you're wrong. Music has this beautiful quality that everybody can feel
Exactly.
or make out of it whatever they feel. If they
Exactly.
were washing their dishes and broke their best dish that day and hear some sad music, in their mind is going to be about that poor dish that died, right? So, and it's okay.
And that's the
Uh,
power and the
and
connection
that's the
that you and I
power
are
of,
in the profession for.
and
It's
that's why
just the
music
magic of it
is
all.
also universal, because you put whatever feelings to it. The feelings the music conveys are the same, but then you adapt the feelings to your own experience culturally and where you are at that point in life, right?
And that's
Or
why
that day.
composers keep their mouths shut.
Yeah, we shouldn't talk too much.
You
And that
give you
sometimes I don't
what
want
I
to
mean
talk too much.
is in
Except,
program notes,
yeah,
but the point, and then because that's the whole thing, is to see how, like me, when I get my crazy reactions to what you have
and
composed. Go
sometimes
ahead.
when they invite me, come to a concert and tell the audience before it begins, I really don't like doing that because I feel everybody wants to listen to whatever they want. Why, who am I to come and tell them this music is about this
Yeah, you
or
set
that?
them up actually by doing that.
Yeah, but Fall of Cusco was different. It was premiered in Nashville, Giancarlo
Hmm.
Guerrero,
Oh,
Nashville Symphony.
yes, yes.
Uh, and, you know, there is one thing that I'm convinced of. Orchestra music or my music, I was I was given a voice that's very powerful as a composer. I have the power of making people feel things, right? That's what we composers have. We manipulate people's emotions. And I do feel my responsibility to use that power to make people feel things. In this case, what I wanted to do, I didn't really want to historically convey something because we know so little of what happened at that time with Pizarro and the destruction of the Inca Empire. But I wanted people to feel themselves in their heart what those Inca people may have felt. And that's what a painting cannot do, but music can do. Music can make you feel terrified of what happened, or sad, or powerful, or happy. So, and I think as a composer, I have the obligation also, by creating these emotions in the people of today, to give a voice to those people who were killed, who didn't have a voice, didn't have a chance to write a book and say, this is what's happening to us. So I do feel that is my responsibility, and it's a good use of my power uh, as a composer creating for an orchestra. So Fall of Cusco was really deliberately, um, it's just like I put myself in that time and those days where the whole thing collapsed, and I wanted to tell the story from the beginning to the end. Uh, and not so much to read a book to the audience, but put the audience in the middle of it and make the audience feel what these people were feeling there. What I think they were feeling, because we don't know. But obviously, it wasn't a very nice story.
Well, let me jump
Uh,
in and just
yeah,
remind everyone that this is the genocide of an entire people. All their treasures, everything melted down, everybody killed, the cities destroyed. This is horrific. What took place in South America in the 1520s and 30s when the Spanish liberated the people to Christianity. I'm gonna go to hell for that one, I'm sure. But I don't want to make light of it, because I think what you described, what I would agree with you is you do have a responsibility, and it's because history is written by the victors,
yes,
and all history really needs to be very seriously rewritten, and you have just done so with this very descriptive movie.
mm,
It's a sound movie, and
yeah.
I mean, it is a tone poem. You have very, very deliberately told the story. Can you get me there? Because Richard Strauss is rolling in his grave already with jealousy. Uh, what a glorious tone poem. I'll do a little bit here, but this is what's so wonderful, as you have mentioned, and as we all are so proud of in our profession of music. This music, this oral experience is the one that goes directly to the brain. And as you said, as we have known, since whatever the tempering thing, when we say, oh, well, G major will make people happy, and B minor will make them want to, I don't know, confess or something. But that's the magic of it all. Do you want to give me a little overview of how you conceived this story, or the sections? There are 5 sections, as I recall.
I don't remember it very well, but I mean, at the beginning, the piece starts, is very happy. It's again an ideal world. It's sort of high in the Andes. You hear birds, you hear
Yeah, that's a one you use that in
flutes.
other pieces, and it
Yeah,
takes us to the
the
happiness
giant
before.
guitar.
exactly.
It's similar.
So,
So obviously, the world is not ideal. I'm sure there were problems then before, right? But you want to get the drama from the extremes. So then there is the theme that uh, identifies. It has a little leitmotifs thematic in the piece. So the theme of Pizarro appears at first. The violas bring it.
I'm going to have to really look at this piece. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to get too technical, but so.
But it's interesting because
characters,
instruments as characters are very, very important in a narrative. So
yeah,
it's very interesting. That's good to know.
The theme, there is the theme of the Incas, right? Which interacts. Those are the two themes, and so the theme of Pizarro grows more and more powerful until it takes over the piece. And it takes over from a harmless viola to the entire percussion at the end, and all the brass just so loud. I don't think I've written anything so loud at the end, but I wanted that boisterous sound of. So then, of course, there is the war, the battles. You hear that in the middle of the piece.
And let me jump in for just a second. My own imagination, and then I'm going to pull out so you can continue the story. But right before the battles, as I also believed I was hearing going on, the horror of it all, I heard the bad guys sneaking up on the Inca. I heard the sounds that were kind of low and in the grass and kind of ominous, and then they got a little bigger and a little bigger. I could just imagine this event. Anyway, sorry. But
well, there is, I don't see music as the moment. When I conceive music, music is like a good movie. You have to build a real world. There has to be flashbacks and flash forwards. You need to build a depth of reality
and an art
within,
and an art, yeah.
So there is a long harp solo which has the theme that I use for the Inca people, right? And the harp solo is so sad, and it happens before the battle begins. And in my mind, there was like one person. I get emotional when I think of this. It's just very strong for me. But it was the entire orchestra stops, so the harp plays a solo, which is interrupted by a brutal triple fortissimo timpani. So to me, that is like the last song of these people, because that person playing the harps knows what's happening after that. And it's going to be the end of it. So
let me jump in, because this is exactly the tradition in Native American culture also. This kind of the death dance, or the war dance, or the white shirts. I can't remember what that was. When all was lost, or the premonition that it was over, that life of the Native Americans was over. There's the sad song, it's a very clear, that whole harp solo and everything, and it's exactly as you've described it. Yeah.
And it's very scary. Every time it's played in concert, there is always somebody in the audience who screams, because the harp, the tension goes to zero. Yeah. The harp plays harmonics, which is like the softest you can play in a concert hall, and then all of a sudden comes the big percussion timpani hit, and then it's followed by absolute chase and chaos and battle.
Okay, now I know. You stole that from Firebird.
I know. That famous Kachai.
And you've seen the little video where the guy does the slam and someone goes, ah! Well done. But and by the way, that's good.
At the end, I didn't want to end with the absolute fall of Cusco, because if you listen to the end, it's like a question mark, because the end is the victory of Spain and the conquest, but it's also, in my mind, the movie goes on, because it also it's foretelling you that out of that defeat comes a new race of Spanish and indigenous people mixed together that will build a new culture. And I think human history is a little, there are different, people become different, in even the way they look. And then they come together and mix. And then they start becoming different again through many years. And I think that tension of, um, it's not a nice history in a way. We are crazy animals, right? But I
We're the
think
least
out
worthy
of
of
that,
survival on the
out
planet,
of that,
humans.
if you look at human history, it's always coming together,
Yeah.
becoming one group of people, then separating, becoming different, going somewhere else, becoming different, then coming back together. And so there is everything that disappears um, opens the doors for something new
And comes back again, if you
in
will.
a new form.
I was even thinking about kneading dough in a way. You knead it, and you
Yeah.
separate it, and you knead it again, and so on. Now, but here I may really be in trouble. But I have to ask this one because I thought, yes, I have it. I know it. I've got the answer here. I'm speaking of the last chord. I found I misunderstood apparently. I found it a little sinister, even a sinister joke, because what I thought I was hearing was a holy chord at the end of that piece that said essentially, guess who won? Come on,
Yes.
help me out.
Yes. To me, the bells have to do with uh,
But
Catholic
also that
religion.
last chord is practically an
If
amen,
you
is it
hear
not?
the piece, the first time the Pizarro theme comes at the beginning of the piece, the violas hold these very dark chords, and the theme begins, and there are church bells.
I remember that for sure, but
And
I was not clear that that was the
at
Pizarro
the
thing.
end, I bring,
Ah,
yes, of
bingo,
course. You know, they
bingo,
came with a cross. So, and then
bingo.
at the end, there are all these bells going crazy.
And
Um,
it does end with an amen,
but
or not.
yes,
Thank you.
but
Okay, because I
I
thought I was losing my
also
mind.
historically, I wanted to bring the brightness of the bells and the brass. If you know the history, Pizarro captures Atahualpa, and in order to release him, um, he asked for a room filled with gold, right?
Yeah.
And from everywhere they start bringing gold and gold and gold until they fill this building, and there is, so visually I had this pile of gold, which to me signifies human greed, how far you're willing to go for greed. So the brass and that boisterous brass sound is just this overwhelming shine, of the gold. And of course, uh, Pizarro takes all the gold, and historically what happens is he still kills
Yeah, it garrots him,
so
no
it's a
less.
total betrayal in every sense,
So thank
right?
you very much, because I
And
see here
so
in my stream of consciousness notes, there's trouble, evil, deceit coming. Now the section with the tolling bell. A trinity for the Inca was kind of the way I saw it. There in the end, the tolling bell at the end, and then the high string tremolo is exactly like in the movies. You know, the bad, it's that tense thing that says the bad guys are up to something bad, and then as we've said, the victors tell the tale with the holy amen at the end.
mhm.
Okay, we have to end it. We have to end it. Let's go. Let me go back up to the top so I can get your credits a little bit once more here. What a pleasure! And I've told you over the weeks and whatever months that we were kind of in communication about the upcoming performance of the violin concerto with the Santa Barbara Symphony. But somehow I feel like I've known you for a zillion years, and I think that's it. Somewhere, somehow, we've had that talk, but can't quite pin it down. But I knew that you were here, close by, at some point for a long number of years, and active.
Yes.
There were performances going on and stuff like that. So it's so nice to finally make a real I don't know, real satisfying interview with you after all this time. Miguel del Águila, I thank you very, very much. It's been great fun. We're talking about your, no, not really fun, but very, very informative, your 2022 Albany Records release, Miguel del Águila, Orchestral Works. This is with the Augusta Symphony Orchestra, Dirk Meyer conductor, and violinist Guillermo Figueroa, I always mess that up. All orchestral works, including the violin concerto. And as we've had through this chat, you can't find programming that could be more intoxicating to an audience, because you do drag them in and you do give us magic and sparklers, and you cast spells. That's the best way I can possibly put it. Miguel, thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.
And
Thank
have a good continuing life in Seattle. I envy you your skyscraper view of the city from your condo. And I'm glad I live in Southern California. Again, where it's sunny most of the time. Anyway, very good. Thanks so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Bye.